A compelling story is one that engages its audience both emotionally and intellectually. An audience is engaged intellectually when they're presented with questions that they want the answers to, or when they're learning something interesting. An audience is engaged emotionally when they connect with the characters. It's the storyteller's job to create a plot, a setting, and characters capable of doing this. Only then can those pieces be brought together to tell a compelling story. When you're creating the plot for your story, it's about more than just making obstacles for your characters to overcome. It's about the ways the characters are going to change in response to those obstacles. Those changes pique our curiosity as an audience. They make us want to know what comes next. They can touch us emotionally as well. Now, providing questions can also engage your audience on an intellectual level. Finding those answers could be part of the narrative, or you can spontaneously uncover them in order to propel the story forward. Unpredictability is vital when you're telling an engaging story. We spend our entire lives exposed to different stories, and we begin to subconsciously find the patterns in them. We start to predict where a story is going to go next. So it's important for a storyteller to know those common themes and tropes and to play around them, defy the audience's expectations. Adding a twist to a familiar archetype or a scenario can keep the reader guessing, and those surprises keep the audience on edge. It makes them eager for more. Subplots in your story don't need to tie into the main plot, but they shouldn't exist in a vacuum either. They can add depth to a character or to your setting. You can show a character's backstory or maybe the consequences of their actions. And if you want to enrich your setting, you can demonstrate an aspect of the world in which your story takes place. That said, it's not realistic for all of the subplots to somehow be related back to the main plot. It's a little bit too convenient. But it is important that the subplots affect the main plot. They might complicate the story, create unnecessary time limits. They could tax the characters socially or tax them emotionally. When figuring out my central cast for a story that I'm telling, one or two of those characters are usually created while I'm formulating the plot, and then I come up with a general idea of what's needed and fill in the gaps from there. I like to start small with a cast of characters, give the audience time to get accustomed to one or two of them before adding more. As many as I need for the plot and to provide different perspectives. This allows time for people to get used to characters and to the group dynamics, and then lets them see how new characters might change those things. This gives you a lot of great opportunities for conflict and complications in the story. The important thing about characters is that they need to be well developed. It can be really tempting to have them do or say something out of character just to advance your plot, but those moments really need to be earned and justified. Tropes and stereotypes can be a useful starting place when you're making characters, but only if you're going to put a twist on them. Just like with plots, we come to expect certain things from certain character archetypes, from the jock, the bully, even the hero or the villain. And it can be really rewarding to play around with those expectations. A character that changes in response to the challenges that they face will engage the audience emotionally, and seeing how they overcome those obstacles is what makes them engaging intellectually. Although it's important, the setting should really form as a response to the needs of your plot and your characters. This isn't to say that it exists at their convenience. The setting should feel organic. World building is really important. You need to create cultures and societies that make sense in the context of the world that they live in and interact with. And you should be able to think about how it all meshes together. You should be able to answer questions and address topics as they arise in the story, but I don't like to get too far out of my way to flesh out things that just won't be relevant to the story that I'm trying to tell. Once you have the basic outline of your plot, your setting, and your characters, it's time to tell your story. As a storyteller, it's my job to understand how all of those parts interact and think about how changes to one part affect the others. A compelling story is one that engages its audience on both an intellectual and an emotional level. Knowing how to tell a story is important, but sometimes you also need to know how to inform your audience. Technical writing is an important skill for this. It lets you break something down into more manageable steps and pieces, or take a complicated concept apart, explain the individual parts, and then show how they all interact with each other. I use this a lot in game design. After a game is made, I need to create instructions so that it can then be played. It's also useful when writing a script for film or theater. It lets you write stage and acting directions or describe a set and how to build it.